So welcome to everyone. Today we are having introduction to Docker environment led by Gael Forget from MIT. This will be a 1-hour technical session in a context of JuliaEO Workshop 2023 that is going to take place in January, in 1 month or so. So Gael, the floor is yours.
All right. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. All right, so I'm going to share the screen. There we go. So welcome everybody. So this is going to be a brief introduction to Docker and why we are going to use it and how for the workshop. So we're not going to go very deep into Docker, but focus on the way we're going to use it. And so to start, you might not be familiar with what Docker is. I'm fairly recent to it myself. I'm not an expert, but it is something you have probably used without knowing it, because it's a very common framework used in cloud computing in particular. And so I have a little presentation here that you will find on our GitHub repository, which has a bit of explanation at the top and then a little demo that I will run for you. And so to start, what Docker is, the best way to look at it is going to be looking at their web page. So I'm going to start with this. So this is Docker, the documentations for Docker. Docker itself is a application or a platform. Is described in this page in detail. But most importantly, and in summary, it provides a way to distribute an environment, like a computational environment. And that's where we were going to be able to all, using the same computational environment, hopefully run the same notebooks during the workshop. And so there are several concepts involved. We don't need to go into all of the details. The Docker desktop is an application that you will install, and that will be sort of the main tool. There's a command line interface to it, which is going to be just Docker, like this. So that's what we're going to use. The other thing I'm going to mention right away is there's this concept of images and containers. So images are what you will get and then use to turn it into a container. So an image, in the terminology of this framework, is a read-only template of a computational environment. And then the container is the runnable instance of the image. So in practice, this is going to look very familiar fairly quickly. We're going to be using this to run something like that, which is just a Jupyter Hub instance. You're probably familiar with a bunch of with these sort of things, and there's a bunch of them out there in different communities. And I'll get to the specifics of this one in a second. So to learn how to use Docker, I would refer you back to this web page. It has examples in it, and we're going to do something very similar. It also has this link here that tells you how to install Docker. So here you're going to find ways to just install this application on your machine, whether that's a Mac, a Windows machine, or a Linux computer. And so once we have all taken that, installed something like this, we can then run the same environment regardless of the machine. that you're using. So that's the sort of the main goal. So coming back to my notes, this was just to introduce you to what Docker is. So I covered this. So Docker is this platform. It provides images that you will get from typically from their server to your machine, and then on your machine you will instantiate that into a container. We're going to be doing this together in a second. Why do we want to do this? For the workshop is something I try to explain here. So the idea is to provide all of us with the same environment, which is going to be both customized to our needs, but also controlled. And so one of the goals of this is to avoid finding ourselves at the workshop with everybody has a different computing environment, and we spend a lot of time debugging why something doesn't work on somebody else's computer. With doing this, we should save ourselves a lot of this trouble. It will also give us the ability to share notebooks in a way that is reproducible by providing the environment that goes with it. And ultimately, it will allow you to run those same notebooks on any platform, whether that's a PC, a Mac, or a cloud computer. All of those can use Docker. So maybe I'll take a first little break here to see if we have any questions, or if any of my co-panelists want to jump in. The link to the GitHub page, yes. The link to the GitHub page currently is this one. I'm putting that in the chat. If I can figure out how to do that. Oops. So this should be in the chat now, the link. And it's a link to what's currently a branch within a pull request. At the end of this, we will edit it, and I assume we will merge it into the main repository. So once that's done, it will be on the main repository of the Julia workshop. Any other questions or comments at this stage? Cannot see the link in the chat. Oh. That's strange. What did I do? Oh, sorry for that. I need to put everyone. There we go. How about now? Do you see the link? Yes. Okay. And I might as well point you to also the main repository of the workshop, which is this one. So this is where you will find the website link with all of the information, and we will put in this folder the various documents that we will prepare for the workshop, starting with this one. So this file is the one I was looking at. Okay. So now I'm going to go back to my presentation and start the demo. We will come back on this part at the end. But let me show you what this looks like. So first of all, here you have this so-called Docker desktop. It has different categories in it, and what you see is that there is one image that's already there, because I started earlier, and a container that goes with that. This is what's running on this here. And then here's an example of a notebook that is the sort of materials that we plan to have and use during our hands-on session, in particular, hands-on sessions, I should say. So this is a Pluto notebook. If you're not familiar with that yet, you will be by the end of the workshop. This is an alternative to the Jupyter notebook, which you're probably familiar with, and you can also use here. So this is a Jupyter notebook where we can do, I don't know, a Julia command, which hopefully will work. So we are in ultimately what's called the Jupyter Hub instance. That's this kind of configuration. And we are going to be using that on our local machine. This is running on my local machine to run notebooks. And I will explain also how to bring in data sets into this. So this particular notebook is one that looks at a set of GeoJSON files that comes from the NBON Marine Biodiversity Ocean Network website, which is one of our partners, and we'll have an activity on this. So to show you something concrete that will reflect the user experience we are hoping to have at the workshop, and a concrete example of something we use. So stepping back, we're going to go back to the very beginning and how to run these things. We're going to start with having installed Docker Desktop means that I also have installed the command line interface to it. As I move the camera away. Here, you have something that is called Docker. I'm in the terminal window on my laptop. So this is just an application that's been installed. And it has various commands. One of them is it gives you the list of containers that's running. So when I do that, I see the one that I've already started. We're going to start something new. And we're going to go back to the simplest thing, or the most standard thing that you can think about, which is using this base Jupyter Notebook instance. So if I take this code and I put it here, and I just run that, what's happening is, I broke something. Interesting. Oh, I see. Right. So let me not do that. The reason this failed was that the port was not properly allocated, which is probably why this is not going to work for me either. It did. It did, but it does not show me the correct instance now. I don't want to close the other one, or should I do that? Okay, let me just that. And then we just stop both of them. I'm going to delete this one. Okay. So that's the joy of live demos, I guess. So now what do I have? I have nothing because I've closed everything. And I'm going to go back to this. So all right, so now this has run the way that I was expecting it to run. We are going to then open the container that's been created. So if I go back here, now I can show you that this has been created. In fact, the image has also been downloaded. So it's this Jupyter base notebook image. And it's created a container because I called the docker run command here. Now this creates, this gives you a link here that you can then open. And now you're seeing something that resembles what we had before, except that it is simpler and it does not have Julia in it. So that's the reason why we're going to use something else. But it's a good example to illustrate the whole process. And that's the first thing you should be able to do on your own machine, is to run this one command. This is a slightly simpler case than the one we're going to use. But like I said, it's useful. And I would comment a couple things here. This is the name of the instance of the image, excuse me. This at the beginning is a specification of the part. That's the way that the container is going to give you an URL that you will be able to see on your laptop. This 88888 number is the default part that's been chosen by the Jupyter project. And we're going to be using it again with our own instance later on. So that's why there was a clash, is because I was using the same part for two things. But coming back to this instance we just created, a couple of things to mention. First, you can readily start a Python notebook. So hopefully this should work. And one more thing here is this URL, which is what we were prompted to open, which I'm going to repeat here, as this token. So the token is going to be important because you're going to need it when you pause and restart a instance, a container. So I'm going to take that and I'm going to do something which is, I'm going to save this notebook. I'm going to put it test1. Okay. I'm actually going to shut down, shut down kernel. So now I can go here in my containers and I can pause it. I can restart it. And I can even stop it. So I'm going to do that. Once I stop it, I can restart it. Now you see that it's not live anymore. I can close that. If I restart it, I'm going to see everything that I had before. This will let me open it back in the web browser. This will give me a terminal window on that, in that container. So this is it. Now I'm inside the container and I can see what we did before. So this lets me point out that there is persistence. As long as you don't completely delete the instance, you can go back and find what you did before. So the files will be persistent. If you go with open with the web browser, this is where the token is going to come handy, because you ask for the token. So you put the token in. Of course, I took the wrong one. You put the token in. If you have the correct one, it will work. Now, the other thing is, in the terminal window, if somehow you've lost your token, you can get it back with this command. And so if I take this one, it should be the correct token. And I put it here. Now I'm back in the terminal window, in the Jupyter Hub. And what you see is that this file still exists, so I can open it again. All right, it's still the same Python notebook. I'm not going to spend more time on it. It's just a demo, but I would mention that here you have other functionalities directly in the Jupyter Hub instance. There's a lot that this can do, and that's one of the reasons we are going to rely on this moving forward for the workshop, is because we don't need to reinvent any of this. Now, one thing to point out is you can always get within the Jupyter Hub, you can get an instance. You can get a terminal window, sorry. And there you can see again the same thing. It's a bit small. And the font doesn't come very, very nice, but you know, you see that. On the left side, you have a way to navigate. So you can click here. Anytime you want something new, you hit the plus button and you have access to, again, starting a terminal window, a markdown file, all sorts of things with this clickable way. So I will pause here and close this one before I start the next one to see if there's any questions or comments. So now I'm going to not only stop it, but I'm going to delete it. So now this is when what I just did is completely gone. So until you do that, you can get back to your files inside of the container. All right. So there's a comment about using the Git client for Jupyter Lab. So this would be let me bring that up. I see. So this is not something I've used, but we can certainly add it to the Docker file. The Docker file that I just referred to is the way that we set up what goes into a Docker container or Docker image in the first place. And so this is the kind of commands that we would put in there. The one that we are going to be using right now does not have this. It does have Git installed, but I don't think this way. All right, any other question or comments? Yeah, so there's a question, should we all use the same Docker container? That's the goal, to the extent that we can. So, and that Docker container is going to be the one that's listed here. This is the next part of the demo, so it gives me a nice transition. And I'm going to show you what it looks like. This is the Docker image that I had created for the Julia Climate organization. So that's the one that comes with the Julia Climate JuliaEO/notebooks repository. I don't necessarily need to show you that much. But I've simplified it a little bit in the case of this demo, made it a little simpler and easier to run for everybody. I would suggest that we take this as our platform for now, and between now and the workshop, we can modify it, add things to it if needed, that would be of general interest. My idea was to keep it fairly small, not to install everything in the same image, but have everything that everybody will need. Then, if there is a need for that, if for some application we need something rather specific, we can create more of those images, and we will have the ability at the workshop to switch between one and the other. But to the extent that we can use the same image and just add things in it using Git or using mechanisms that are provided by Docker, I think that'll be plan A. Let me start this one. All right, so this one is the same as I was showing you before. But before I go there, Gael tells me that the pull request has not been merged. So the document that I'm looking at, my notes are here in docs, and then everything I'm reading and the links that I'm clicking on are going to be there. So now you can just go to this, the main repository. All right. And so in the demo, we have done this part. We have done this second part to show you the base Jupyter Notebook instance. I've told you about the URL that you end up clicking on. So in the new one, it's the same thing. I've started this number 4, right? And if I click on the URL here, it should open it up. Now you can also copy and paste this URL. It just happened on a Mac. You click on it and it opens the window. So this is the same as you've seen before, but there's a couple of differences. Most importantly, we now have Julia in there. And so if I click on this one, I'm going to find that I can do Julia commands. On top of that, there is the Pluto extension. There's a question as to how to close the part. But there is an error saying oops, there's a 1. Okay, let me just share this because this is going on. Yes, so Alex is correct, although this is meant to be, I believe, that instead. So if the port was already taken by another instance of Docker, you would kill it here in the container. So if you delete the one that was previously running, But I think even if you just stop it, I think you should be able to access this port again, this port 8888. So, right, so I was suggesting this is now a valid Julia instance, as you see with you using a package. And then Pluto should work also. So this means that we have pre-installed Pluto in the image, and that there's also an extension on the Jupyter Hub that lets you click on this. But so now you have this this interface that, if you're using Pluto, you're going to be very, very familiar with. This is an example of, we can run the demo notebooks inside of Pluto. So this is the way that a Pluto notebook looks like. We will tell you more about this, but this is a bit different than Jupyter in several ways. Mostly it's reactive. And it has the dependencies to your packages sort of embedded in it. So if you're used to something like Conda, essentially your Pluto notebook has the Conda environment, or what corresponds to that, inside of the notebook, which make them easy to reproduce. So this one should now be live. I'm not mistaken. No, it's still booting. Doesn't matter much. I'm going to kill this instance anyway, because I want to show you the next example. Here we don't have access to anything that's on the host machine. Everything you do within will persist as long as you don't delete the container. But that's it. It won't exist outside of the container. Now that's a limitation sometimes. I'm just going to stop this one. That should be enough. So again, it's now done. And close this. I want to go back here. Now we're going to do something else, which is going to be, we are going to add a data set or a folder that we are going to mount from the host machine, which is my laptop in this case, onto the container. So we will have access to that. I'm going to take this one, which is one of the data sets we might use for the workshop. Sorry. So I'm going to want to add this to the same command I was doing before, which is docker run. And then this. So same as before. The only difference is now there is going to be a folder in there. And so if I open this, same as before, the difference is this folder has been added. So this is a folder that's from my laptop. It contains a bunch of TIFF files, and it's from a data set that was released not long ago by ESA. It's a high resolution, I think 10-meter resolution global map. And we're going to be able to use it once Pluto starts with a notebook that I have on the side. I'm just going to get now. So I was thinking about the Julia Climate notebooks. It's this folder. This contains a long list. So you'll find this in the Julia Climate organization on GitHub. And it has a long list of notebooks, some of which might become material for the workshop. And I'm just going to take this one example. No, sorry, this one. So I'm copying the URL. Okay. Sorry, Pluto is starting. There we go. So we're back to Pluto, right? We haven't changed anything compared to the previous example, except that now there is this folder called World Cover 2021. And I'm going to copy and paste here the URL of the notebook, which is going to open, hopefully. The notebook, once it's rendered and once it's running, is going to look like this. This web page is just a HTML page, but it's the rendering of the notebook. Once you have the live version running of these notebooks, it will build itself into that. But meanwhile, it lets me show you briefly what this dataset is about. So like I said, it's a high resolution map set of GOT files that represents the entire globe and give you different indices for different type of vegetation types, essentially. So it's something that will provide for some of our use cases during the workshop, potentially. It's a little big when you get the entire data set, but you can do a lot with just a chunk of it. And so this is what this notebook does. Once it is loaded, it will let us explore this data set. And then off we go. We can start doing an activity with this. Similarly, with the GeoJSON dataset I showed you earlier, that's another notebook that you will find online. And the goal, well, one of our goals is going to be to have the speakers contribute notebooks like this that we will be able to run within the same computational environment, whether we are users, attendees, or the speakers. So this is now running. It's going to take a little while to create the prompts that I showed you. Hopefully, it will be done within the remaining amount of time that we have. And I will get back to this. So this is just coming back to my notes. This is what we just did now. We created this one with the wall cover. This is how you created, how you mounted instead a different folder for the GeoJSON example that I was showing you at the beginning, and so on and so forth. So we can plug in whatever folder we need for a particular activity. And then everybody can follow, and we can minimize the amount of time we spend at the workshop, hopefully, dealing with everybody's environments, right? Because the difficulty with anything like a live workshop with hands-on activities, as many of you probably have experiences, you know, everybody has a different computer, and then all of a sudden we're spending our time doing that. So the goal of this is to avoid doing too much of that on site. So there are directions for you to prepare for the workshop along those lines. This is not much, I would argue. Essentially installing Docker desktop. And you might need to create an account with Docker Hub in the process, but that's, you know, that's just a registration. And then I would suggest that you try out first the base notebook that is just the standard Jupyter instance to get familiar with it. Then proceed with this one. So if everybody sort of does that before the workshop, I think we'll be in good place. For the developers, so the speakers, we are hoping that everybody will be able to provide notebooks that will be usable and reusable easily in this context. So once you send us a notebook and we try it this way, we know that other people will be able to do that as well. And then at the workshop, what we're envisioning is, you know, if people want to use their own laptop, that's fine. But I think the idea is going to be, if that fails, then we're going to direct you to the Docker approach to avoid dealing with everybody's laptop and configuration. And so then we will be able to run demos, and everybody will be able to operate on the same basis. The last thing in my notes before I stop talking and we can discuss more. One thing is to copy the token that you get with the URL when you do Docker run. That will be easier and make your life easier when you want to restart a container. I would suggest you can do everything with the command line, but that to pause and restart and stop containers, I would suggest using the desktop application. But you can use the command line. That's also fine. And then in terms of the file system, so what I've said, but in summary, once you mount a folder with the -v command, it will be available on the host where you put it, and then you will be able to read, but also write there. So the stuff you write in that folder can be directly saved on your laptop. So that's one way to proceed. You just provide one big folder and you do everything there, so nothing should get lost when you close container or delete them. You can also do that with other folders. So if you, for example, use the work folder that's going to be created in these things. So if here's a work folder, for example, you can start putting files in there and you can download them. So that's another way to proceed that is safe, is you create stuff there and then you download directly. With the download button, you have you can do that, and you can do download here. So that will download to your download folder. So that's one way to make sure you're not losing things. The URL of the Docker file, yes, I will. And the last thing is, so backup, download for backup essentially. And hopefully my notebook is still loading packages, but that's okay. So at this point, I will stop and go back to questions and comments. Okay. So there was comments that, so I'm sharing this, hopefully nobody minds. Yes, so after stopping the container, stopping the container is enough. You don't need to delete it to free the port. Thank you for that. The folder wallcover is empty. That's not surprising because the link that you gave on the left-hand side of the -v command was something that didn't exist. So here, the assumption is I've already downloaded this folder on my laptop. And now when I link it with the -v, it will be mounted here. But if I mount something that doesn't exist or doesn't have anything in it, it will appear as an empty folder. So that's correct. To fix that, ultimately, you want to go back to the page that I was showing you here. Oops, that didn't work for me somehow. Interesting. Probably because I'm not in the right spot. Right. Sorry, just fixing this to show you that things should actually work. And then where is this supposed to be? Here, yeah. Yeah. So now this, now that I've changed folder, this should actually find the files. And rerun. If that still doesn't work, it's because somehow I'm confusing myself. And I did something wrong there, but that's okay. Ultimately, if everything's in place, CD. Oh yeah, that's right. Thank you for that. Although I still also need to have the right path. So let me just do that, and then we'll get there. I understand what I did, but I'm going to do it the proper Julian way this time. So there we go. And then hopefully this path now finds the files and stuff will proceed. Okay. Let's go back. Can you share the URL of the Docker file? Should we make a PR to add our dependency to this Docker file? Or should we layer our Docker image on top of that one? That's a very good question. So I would say for now, start by doing it on your end. So you can always fork the folder, the repository, and do modifications without sending a PR. PR stands for pull request, in case some of you are not familiar. This is one of the mechanisms on GitHub by which we contribute to one another's work. So just to show you where this one is. Currently, so this is the repository. Sorry, moving that. This is the repository behind the web page that I showed you. So this repository serves two purposes: to build, or three, but mostly to build a web page, which is this, which is going to have all of the links of the documentation and some explanation at the end, in fact, on how to run things, but also to build the Docker image. The Docker image that was on this repository right now is a little more than what we need. And so I simplified it. And currently, the one I was showing you is this one here. So this is the current endpoint for that. Yeah. So that's the one I would suggest as of now as a base. I'm going to put it in the here. So that's in response to Alex's question. you can also more generally follow up with us with questions and suggestions, either on the repository. So here in the JuliaEO repository, you can open an issue and either report something that doesn't work or ask for a question. So for example, this question that was asked by Alex, I think could be here. We also have a Slack channel, which is indicated, I believe, on the website. So here you have the Slack channel. So that's another way to reach us and follow up on this. Today was really meant to be, a recording to bring everybody up to speed. Thank you for the very good questions, though. And yes, we should have the Docker file in the JuliaEO repository eventually. There's a question of how you build them. So it was just more practical for me to do it this way. Also, the work was already done. The Docker file itself, since we've talked about it, is here. You need a bit more than that to create the images. But essentially, here is the list of what's in there right now. So there's a bunch of Julia things, and there's a few sort of command line things and shell aspects that we might need. There's also somewhere a list of Python packages that have installed on this, partly because, so this is this part, partly because a lot of our attendees might be familiar with some of the Python work and software, and so we want that to be available. So we can just add to those lists. The project.toml is where the list of packages that I have right now in there is. So that's where you would add Julia packages. I've kept it to a fairly minimum amount. So this is for plotting. Again, this is to interact with Python, Pluto, and then I just put CSV and data frames to because they're very commonly used. I'd rather try not to have a huge list here, partly because it can create conflicts afterwards. But we can have several branches of this for sure, and we will post an update on the JuliaEO website. At this point, I've spoken a lot. I might stop sharing the screen, and we can have a little bit more Q&A. I don't know if my co-panelists want to jump in. Anybody? Q&A. Oh. Yeah. Excellent. Katarina just pointed in the chat, gave you the link to the YouTube channel where this will be posted, which we will also put on the webpage, in the GitHub repository. All right, we're almost at the hour, so I think we are close to wrapping up. Any more questions, comments, or hopefully this made sense and was useful? Thank you for those who said this was useful. There was one more question about internet connectivity. That can be an issue, and that's true. That applies both to the Docker images and to data sets. So once we are at the workshop, we will try to minimize downloading things from the internet. So we will have things for you on USB drives, whether that is data sets, but also possibly the Docker images. So you can just copy them directly from the drive. Good suggestion by Alex. And I'm told we will have an upgrade over what the hotel usually provides in terms of Wi-Fi and so on. So hopefully we will be, we won't run into Wi-Fi issues. All right. Okay. Everybody's saying thank you and goodbye. So yeah, have a good rest of the year, vacation if you can, and we look forward to seeing you all at the workshop and interacting with you more. Thank you so much for being here today.